Hey all, Kunik here, back with another D&D horror story for you today. In today's story, we deal with what I will affectionately call a man-child. Someone who just completely goes off the rails for no reason and expects everything to go back to normal afterwards. So, with that all said, let's roll for initiative and get on with the story. Been sitting on this one a while, thought it might be worth sharing. This happened well over 10 years ago, so the details are a little muddy, but there are a few things I could never forget. In community college, there was a guy who hung out in the nerd room who considered himself to be a bit of a tough guy. This really couldn't be any further from the truth. He was short comparatively, not fat, but definitely not in shape. Scraggly and unkempt looking. The kind of guy who wore those Native American wolf art shirts, would often cross his arms and do that anime tisk thing when he thought he was being clever. This guy had already thrown a few public temper tantrums I had witnessed, one of which he literally screamed and threw cards across the room, followed by crossing his arms and pouting. All because his wife, Fairly, beat him in a Yu-Gi-Oh match. He also threw a similar tantrum when people told him they didn't need him to work security for an event the anime club was running. Anyway, he lived with his wife, the DM, the DM's wife, and their kids. I don't think he had any kids himself, but he was a stepfather to his wife's child from her first marriage. I agreed to play because I was friends with the other people and got along well with them. At the time, I didn't know this guy was going to be playing, but I decided to give it a try afterwards anyway, because the DM was pretty good at keeping his outbursts in check. For a little while anyway. During the course of the game, this guy created a human character, then about 2 or 3 sessions in, proceeded to whine for a solid 30 minutes about how his character wasn't special, or didn't have anything unusual or cool about him, and how he wished he had made an elf instead. This went on until the DM paused the game for an NPC to randomly show up and turn his character into an elf. Which, after being turned into an elf, he would derail conversations to talk about his cool elf ears. This went on for another half hour. The DM tried to trek onward, but this dude wouldn't participate unless everyone was talking about his character. Demanded snacks from us in the most passive-aggressive manner. The DM's wife and I stopped the game to drive to the store. I bought cake mix and we drove back, and the two of us spent a good 45 minutes making cake for everyone. He ate 1/3 of the whole cake and did not once thank anyone. He also got cake icing all over the DM's map, which I cleaned up to be a helpful guest. Would talk over me and berate me for forgetting basic combat rules, despite the fact that this was my very first time playing. The DM had to constantly tell him to be patient, to which he would roll his eyes and scoff. Screamed at his wife's little girl, who had approached us to ask about the game. I had started talking to her about my character because she was very sweet, if not a little annoying, but she was literally like 6 to 7 years old. You know, standard kid stuff. He screamed at her to get lost, stop making stupid f***ing questions, and you wouldn't get the game anyway. His tone, body language, and a few other things he said to the little girl that I won't repeat. It just made my blood boil. The kid was clearly very upset. This was the last straw for me when I decided to not come back. I remember asking if there was any way we could play without him, because the DM and other players were still fun to play with. But unfortunately, it was his house, and the DM said if they tried to play without him, he would go out of his way to make a scene. I had to put up with it for so long because I was new to the area and trying to be more social, and D&D was one of the few opportunities I had and get away from my toxic family. I think the whole ordeal lasted maybe 5 to 6 sessions maximum before I had had enough. I didn't play any other tabletop role-playing games again for years because I was so soured on the experience. I'm happy to say I have found a much better group now. End post. Well, I'm glad that there was a semi-happy ending, though I do feel very bad for the kid. Obviously, she can't escape him. He's her stepdad. Yeah, I think in instances like this, the DM really needed to step in He was very clearly complacent of having this guy around, if not a little annoyed, but he certainly allowed it because they lived with him and his wife. So I can't really speak to that scenario, like how everything led up until that point, but just my 2 cents. If I had someone that was couch crashing at my house and they were acting at all like this to anyone, didn't have to be his own stepdaughter, which made it way, way worse considering her age, but if he had spoken to anyone like this at a game I was at, we'd be having a pretty serious talk. Of course, you wouldn't want to put the family out on the streets, but I mean, come on, you have to have some common sense, dude. Anyhow, that's all for this story. If you liked it, the source is in the description, and feel free to comment below for us to have a nice chat about it. And if you'd like to see more of these videos, clicking the subscription button and the bell notification icon next to it will certainly let Google notify you anytime I upload a new video. And while you're at it, clicking the like button will let YouTube know that you liked the video and hopefully push it to even more people. Anyhow, until then, here are a few related videos from my channel.